It's showtime. It's Wednesday night. It's 8 o'clock. It's Panther-Lair Show. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak. The website's Panther-Lair.com. This isn't like the morning pit where you have the banner or even the live shows. We have the banner across the bottom that says Panther-Lair.com. Or all the stuff. I guess it's over in this corner. We don't have any of those things. This is the Wednesday night live show where we keep it au natural. Then we bring in Jim, and there's 2 faces on your screen. Last week we had 4 faces on your screen. That was pretty wild. Matt and Steve joined us. That was a lot of fun, actually, going over those preseason predictions. And thanks to Pitt declining the invitation to the NIT, my bold preseason prediction of the Diaz-Graham twins hitting 45 threes this year fell short. Guillermo made 2 early in the North Carolina game, and I thought I was money. That didn't exactly work out because he ended up only 41. And so, or the twins ended up with 41. So pretty disappointing for me, but we got close. I guess I get an asterisk because Jorge only played whatever he played, half the season or something. Anyway, we're here. The season's over. Pitt basketball is done. Pitt spring camp is in full swing in the South Side. And so we've got a lot to talk about tonight. Remember, you could be part of the conversation here on the Panther-Lair Show, joining the chat screen off to your right, my stage left, your right. Actually, it works well as stage left because if I ever just need to leave, this is the way I get out of my chair. So I would exit stage left like rushed, right? But you can join the conversation, put your comments and questions in the chat screen over there. You can be a super chatter by clicking the $ down there at the bottom of the chat screen and kick a couple bucks to the podcast. We always appreciate that support for sure. And we make sure we read your comment or your question if you are a super chatter. If you're not a super chatter, we'll get to as many as we can. A lot of times we have more comments and questions that we can get to, but we'll try. We'll try to get to everybody's thoughts on Pitt basketball or Pitt football, whatever is on your mind. Of course, remember the website Panther-Lair.com is the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Panther-Lair.com, Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And message boards interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are hanging out and talking about Pitt sports on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Certainly a lot of conversation on the basketball message boards right now as people are talking about the offseason and what it's going to hold and what it's going to bring. And certainly that'll be a big topic for us here tonight. You have thoughts about Bub Carrington, Ishmael Leggett, Jalen Lowe, Federico, the twins, all those things. You can post your comment or your question over there and we'll talk about it. Let's bring in our good friend Jim Hammett from Panther-Lair.com. Jim was in Washington, D.C. for the whoops, we got the wrong one. There it is. Jim was in Washington, D.C. for the ACC tournament. Jim, did either outcome of the Pitt games, did the outcome of either of those surprise you?
I can't say they really did. I mean, even looking back at the Pitt North Carolina game, I think the line was 7.5, and it ended up at 7. So they always know. So, yeah, I mean, they played them tough, and they went cold in the final 4 minutes. And R.J. Davis was the conference player of the year, and he did those kind of things. He hit a bunch of big shots down the stretch, but I thought they played hard. I mean, they did everything they could against North Carolina. It's not an easy matchup. North Carolina is very good. That's a team that's capable of winning it all. So I thought on a neutral floor they equated themselves pretty well. I thought Bub Carrington shined as well as anyone on the floor for either team. And yeah, I mean, it came down to, there's Pitt lost 11 games this year. There's probably been about 3 or 4 of them where Blake Hinson just went totally absent, and unfortunately that was one of them. They just couldn't get him going, and he even tried to do some crazy shots or some fade away, fall away threes. And sometimes he makes them, and sometimes that's what gets him going, and he just couldn't get one to drop. So, for them to even be in contention that late in the game without him, I think that speaks to how good of a basketball team they really were this past season. And, obviously we know the ending of that story.
Right. Yeah, they had it's a 3-point game in the final 4 minutes with Blake Hinson doing nothing, like you said. But they only
It was tied.
Oh yeah, well yeah, it was tied at 4:22. Right. I said inside the final 4 minutes,
Oh, okay.
inside the final 4 minutes, not inside the final 242 seconds or 262 seconds. That's not what I'm. No, but you're right. I mean, 62-62, and then Carolina got a basket, made a three at the 4:01 mark, and then as you said, I mean, Pitt had one basket in the final 4 minutes. That was Bub Carrington hitting a three inside the final minute. I mean, that's they had done well. I mean, they had those stretches in a number of games where they just didn't finish well. But I felt like near the end of the season, in the games that they won, at least they were able to make baskets down the stretch. They did it against Wake Forest, but this one they just couldn't go. I mean, it just and Ishmael Leggett didn't do much. Particularly after the game he played against Wake Forest, he was he was really quiet, and it was really just the freshman guards were the only guys who really had good games. It's disappointing, and I kind of want to jump right into these comments over here because Josh Newark had like a 3-part comment that I want to get to because I think it's pretty good. It says Chris and Jim, I'm still trying to come to grips with this season ending. It wasn't like a season-ending loss. I wasn't mad or sad. I think the word I'm looking for is empty. No proper farewell. It's kind of like your favorite movie or book trilogy where it builds to a climax and then the director or author never finishes the end. Just a strange, unsatisfied ending. The season was a success, but it lacked the necessary closing for me. I wanted one more Hinson moment, one more chance to see the freshman. I'm sure, like most Panther fans, we were wondering what could have been. You were in the locker room after the game. I mean, did it feel like that's it, season's over? Did you sort of get a sense that guys were looking forward to the next one?
I mean, they were all very aware of what everyone was saying about them, about the bracketology projections. I mean, they understood, and we were talking about it. We interviewed them about it, and Jalen Lowe and Bub Carrington both made it very clear. It's like we think we're pretty good. I think Blake Hinson did as well. So it didn't feel like the end. So I get what you're saying, and even I think Sunday after the season ended, I wrote something about Blake Hinson because I feel like I had to. I mean, like his career was over, and like this guy was awesome, and like he didn't get to have that moment. Like last year when the team got knocked out, it was Jeff Capel, it was Nike Sabandi, and Nelly Cummings. They're all sitting next to him on the stage, in Greensboro, and they had their moment. They got to say what they wanted to say. This team didn't. I mean, they didn't
Yeah.
really get to talk about the season because they were so locked in on the moment, and they still believed they were going to get into the tournament. And it was just like Sunday night with about 7 o'clock. I think you texted me. You're like, "Well, they're declining the NIT bid." So it was like, "This is it. It's over."
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there was no finality. There was no goodbye. There was no anything. So I could get why fans would feel that way. I think the players probably feel that way, and even the media did. I mean, we didn't get to like ask those like, "What did you guys really accomplish this season?" questions, and sometimes you want to ask those, and we just never got that chance.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's sort of fitting. I mean, the final comments were, we think we're good. We think we're a good
Yeah.
team, which sort of I think sums up what this season was this team sort of, I mean, they had their ups and downs. First time they ran into a challenge in the Florida game, they lost and they got pushed around. But they bounced back from that, and then they have the disappointing loss to Clemson. They have the 1-5 start in the ACC, but then they go on a run and ended up being, I think, one of the best teams in the conference, as evidenced by their finishing spot, and presumably, one of the best teams in the nation. What do you think was the thing that hurt them the most? Was it the non-conference schedule, or was it, losing to Missouri, and a couple of the home losses that like you could have one or the other? You could have a few of those home losses or the bad non-conference, but you couldn't have them both.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of a product of having both. I mean, I think they could have overcome that non-conference schedule if they just beat Missouri and maybe Syracuse. Like 2 extra wins, I think would have done it. I mean, if they were the fourth team out of the tournament, it was close, and they obviously had their bid stolen over the weekend. There was 5 or 6 of those tournaments where it just went against them. It was just everything that could go wrong for Pitt. Like after they got knocked out, did go wrong. Like everyone was watching. It's like, well, this team wins, but I mean, I do think it was, the non-conference schedule is what it is, and it's weird, and everyone is telling you like, well, Pitt has a terrible non-conference schedule. Well, so does TCU, so does Kansas State. It's like so do all these teams,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, so that's not it, or it's part of it, or it only counts to them. Like it just you never really got like clarity on what it was that they didn't like, but it seems like it was the non-conference schedule. I mean, that's what we've been told by the bracketologists.
And like, I guess Joe Lunardi kept saying like, oh, there's never been a team on the bubble who got in with this bad of a non-conference strength of schedule. And so I guess it's that that qualifier of like, oh, on the bubble. But it's like, how did Pitt end up on the bubble? First of all, if TCU wasn't, you know what I mean? Like, how does Pitt end up on the bubble in the first place? I mean, half the Big 12 had non-conference strength of schedules that were outside of the top 300. I mean, they all scheduled crap games. It's just the whole league did it instead of like Pitt and the ACC were like Pitt and maybe one or two other teams did it. And, the rest of the conference all played like reasonable, I guess. I mean, I have a couple of thoughts. One, people have suggested like maybe you just like kind of almost normalize or like stop counting non-conference strength of schedule after 200. Like you get to 200 and anything beyond that is just there's no 340 or 275 or anything like that. It's either like 1 to 200 or you just count 200 plus. You know what I'm saying? That like so we don't get bogged down in like because I mean, Virginia or whoever it was played like 260. That's not good. It's better than Pitt, who was whatever they 327 or something like that, but it's still not good. You played the 260th worst non-conference strength of schedule, so that's not impressive. TCU was in the 340s or 350s. I just like Lunardi was saying that about the non-conference strength of schedule, but somehow like I don't know how Pitt got to the bubble in the first place. They won 20 plus games. They finished fourth in the ACC. They have these quality wins. I don't get it other than, when you look at the sheer volume of quad 1 and quad 2 games that Pitt played versus TCU or Oklahoma or some of these other schools that like had like 16 or 18 quad 1 games and Pitt had like 9 or 10, which either speaks to the quality of the ACC or speaks to the way the ACC was unable to game the system and job the numbers, juke the stats, as the Big 12 did. You know what I mean? I guess that's what it comes down to. And you end up doing better in the net because you played more of those. But even where was TCU in the net? Were they behind Pitt?
I kind of don't even remember.
I think they were. So like I just don't.
Well, the thing is, it's like they came up with the net 2 or 3 years ago as supposed to replace RPI, and it was like this is our system. We came up with something better. Then why is Virginia getting in the tournament over Pitt if they're like 15 spots lower? I mean, this is the system you developed. This is what the committee said they're going to start using, but they don't use it. So it's like, no, everyone except the Joe Lunardi seems to like doesn't know what's going on. And like, I don't know, like I felt very confused by the past 3 weeks.
Yeah. There were a lot of things that didn't make sense. And which team annoyed you or bothered you the most? Teams that got in? Was it Virginia?
I mean, I think that's just the obvious one. And obviously what happened last night, I was probably one of the worst performances ever in the NCAA tournament. So I'm not
before that, like when you saw the brackets, what team were you like, wait, really?
I think what bothered me the most is Michigan State not even being on the bubble. Like them being an 8 and 9 seed. And I question if Tom Izzo wasn't their coach, would they be an 8 or 9 seed? Probably not. I mean, so there are some situations where, Tom Izzo won a national championship. He always gets credit. Tony Bennett won a national championship. He's always going to get that credit. And I mean, it shouldn't count again. Like history shouldn't be a factor. This is the 68 best teams this year. And at times it didn't feel like that.
Yeah. And I think Jeff Capel has mentioned it as well, sort of in passing, like that the ACC probably takes a hit because Coach K and Roy Williams aren't around anymore. You know what I mean? So you kind of, that takes some of the shine off of the league. Lad Scrimpton says Virginia just embarrassed the ACC. Now all the analysts that were disrespecting the ACC can say, see, I told you. What do you think? Is the ACC lagging behind the other conferences? I don't think, I mean, maybe analysts are saying, see, we told you about the ACC. I think they're saying, see, we told you that Virginia shouldn't be in. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it justified people's complaints about Virginia being in the first place over some of those other teams that were on the bubble, the first 4 out and that kind of thing. I mean, I don't know if I haven't seen it. Have you seen, is it being held against the rest of the ACC, Virginia's struggle last night?
No, I think it's more isolated on Virginia. I think they're kind of wearing that one on their own. And this happens every year with the ACC. Then, like, you never know. Like, Clemson might go on a run. Like, Miami was in the Final Four last year. I mean, the ACC has always performed well in the tournament. It's just they've had a tough time getting teams into it. But I don't know. I mean, when I look at these college basketball games, like I don't see like this great level of like, oh, the Big 12 has superior athletes and players. Like they're all top 100 recruits. They're all like the
Yeah.
same guys. Like if anything, when I watch the Mountain West, I can tell like, oh, there's a reason why he's at Colorado State and not UConn. Like I can tell it there, but the Mountain West gets 6 or 7 teams in.
Yeah. I don't get it. And I've said, I mean, since Sunday, I've said it a bunch of times. Like, it's not like Pitt is blameless. You know what I mean? Like, don't lose to Missouri at home. Like not even about scheduling stuff. Don't lose to Missouri. Beat Syracuse. Win one of those games against Clemson. I mean, like the opportunities were there, and you just, you just had to take advantage of like one of them to overcome it and get in. And I do think if they had gotten in, I mean, barring another, game like Blake Hinson had against Carolina, I mean, I think if they get in, like, it wouldn't shock me at all if they made it to the second weekend. I mean, I think they're talented enough to go off like that with the way Bub Carrington's been playing of late. Ishmael Leggett, I forgot he hit a 3 that got it down to 2 with 5 minutes left to go. It was a huge basket on a fast break. Jalen Lowe, obviously Hinson is Hinson. I mean, like, this is a dangerous team. This is a team that could have made some real noise, and it's disappointing that they didn't get that opportunity to do so.
No, and like those are the type of teams that always thrive in tournaments. Guys that have NBA potential, like Bub Carrington, Blake Hinson can play in the NBA. And I don't know. I'd venture to guess if you ask the 13 other ACC head coaches other than Bennett and Capel, who is more likely to make a run in the tournament, they would have all picked Pitt. Like like in ACC circles, like if the tournament asks like who are the teams that should be in this league, should it be Pitt or Virginia? Everyone in the ACC would have said Pitt.
Yeah.
Like Pitt's the better team, and anyone that watched basketball the past 2 months would have noticed that.
Yeah. And I feel like if coaches in the conference were talking about these two teams, when they talk about Virginia, they would be like, Tony does such a great job. They've got such a great system they run there, and Tony coaches them so well. And if they talk about Pitt, they would talk about Capel, but they would be like, look, Blake Hinson is a murderer. You know what I mean? And Bub Carrington and Jalen Lowe are the two of the most exciting freshmen in this conference. I mean, like, that Guillermo can step out and knock down threes against you, and there's it's really hard to defend against. I mean, like, it's such a cliche to say nobody would want to play, but I mean, I think a lot of teams would be like, I would rather not face that team because they're clicking on a lot of cylinders right now. Maybe not all cylinders, but a lot of cylinders. They're pretty hot ending the season. It's disappointing. It's disappointing because I wanted to watch them play more. You know what I mean? And maybe not in the NIT setting. But I was really excited to see this team play more games, especially after the way they played against Wake Forest and the way they competed and battled against North Carolina. Like sort of on a selfish personal level, I'm just disappointed because I would have liked to watch more basketball games with this team in them. I mean, I'll watch the tournament games, but it would be a lot more fun. You know what I mean? To be able to watch this team for a couple more games.
Yeah, I mean, because we're in the thick of it now. It's the off season for you and me. I mean, we have a long way to go until August. So I mean, there's having a few more basketball games would have been more fun for us. But I guess we'll have some football to talk about here.
Yeah, I guess so. And the transfer portal, as Ryan asks, what kind of guys are targets for the portal? Bigger targets than Leggett and Austin were at the time. I mean, I think there's a couple answers to the question of what kind of targets are they looking for. I think there's the matter of positions, and then there's the matter of like sort of high profile. I mean, we could talk a lot about this, and I think we will. I think it's one of the biggest talking points of the season. Like in terms of player retention and player acquisition, obviously NIL is a factor, always going to be an element in these things. And I think you would agree, Jim. You can tell me if you disagree. Like I think retention is the number one goal. You know what I mean? The number one priority is keeping the guards, getting the guards, bringing the guards back. And then, once you've got that locked up, you work on other things. I mean, they're going to be recruiting guys in the process anyway. But, my point is I don't think they're going to be after all the too many higher profile guys because I just don't think they're going to have the NIL budget for it. And I think we can talk about it in pretty plain terms of what it is. Like, significant majority of the NIL budget, if they're successful in doing so, is going to be used to bring those guys back. And then what's left over will be used to bring in whatever pieces they can sort of supplement with. So I don't see a real high profile transfer portal signing here unless they lose like 2 of those 3 guards, or God forbid, all 3. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, if it comes out and like Bub says, like I'm going to the NBA, I'm declaring, and I'm not coming back, then I think their efforts would go towards trying to land a high impact player. But I mean, it's interesting just the wording of how college basketball is now, and you get press releases from Pitt, and they say in the past they'd say Pitt's going to return seniors so and so and so and so. This year the wording was Pitt can return all of their players or all of its players except Blake Hinson. So it's like can.
Yeah. Can.
So, I mean, that's just kind of where we are right now. It's like, yeah, Pitt could have the exact same team almost, and there's a good chance they think most of the band's going to get back together. But anything could happen. There might be a transfer or two, and I mean, as of right now, if Blake Hansen is the only one leaving, they only have 1 scholarship spot, like because they have 2 high school recruits already signed. So I think they're going to start. We'll know right away, like just by how many guys they start offering and talking to, if they're looking to plan to fill more than 1 spot.
I mean, is there any chance they only bring in 1 other guy?
I would say no.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we know spaces are going to open up, spots are going to open up. Guys are going to leave. I don't think there's any question about that. It's just a question of how many. You think over under 2.5 open spots? So the 1 left open by Blake Hinson, right? And did they? Oh yeah. Well, so after Dior left, Dior was 13, right? When they had Dior, they had 13. Then he left, and they put KJ Marshall on scholarship.
Well, no, they had Michael Hewitt for a couple weeks.
Michael Hewitt, okay.
Then
So those 3 spots, and yeah, you're right, 3 spots, and then the 2 high school guys. So that 1 spot left open, over under 2.5 total. So that 1 spot plus 1 or 2.
I would say over. I mean, I
over 2.5.
Yeah, like that spot, and I could see 2 guys moving on from this team. I don't know who yet. I mean, the very likely one is like Carrington just going to the NBA. I mean, I think he's good enough, and he might get that feedback. And on top of that, there might be a transfer. But I mean, I think that's the biggest question this whole offseason is what's Bob going to do? Because I mean, he can make Pitt could be a really good team next year with Jalen Lowe and Ish Leggett as their guards. They could be a great team, top 25 team if they have all 3 of them. And so that's kind of the line Pitt's towing right now.
I feel like if they get all 3 back, I mean, they should be no worse than top 4 preseason ACC, top 6. Where do you think they would end up if they get all 3 guards back?
I would think in that top 4, top 5 range, and I would think at the second the championship game's over, I think ESPN, Yahoo, they all do their way too early top 25 projections, and like if Pitt has all 3 of those guards and any of those guys watch basketball, which those are the guys that do watch basketball, like I think Pitt will be on some like preseason top 25 lists. That's a great backcourt. I mean, there's not going to be many better in the country next year if they have all 3.
That's what I would think. A Sabo says Elite 8 next year. I can feel it. You need all 3 guards to do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, like, I guess there's a question then of how you fill in around them, right? And this is something, I mean, everybody wants a big man. I just don't know if the budget's there for a big-time big man. If you're able to bring back the 3 guards, that's going to cost you a healthy amount of NIL money. I'm not sure that the budget's there for a big-time guy. So, I mean, what do you go looking for? If you want to bring in another center, if you want to bring in another post player, or, what do you go looking for? What's the ideal kind of player who would be sort of within reach, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to be mindful of like whatever so-and-so tweets out, like Pitt has talked to this guy, like that could mean a simple DM, but the 2 names they've been connected to right away are 6'8" wings. McKeel Brown-Jones from UNC Greensboro and Brandon Johnson from ECU, and they're stretch 4s. They play the Blake Hinson spot. So I think that's probably going to be priority 1 is to try to kind of find that stretch 4 and someone that can shoot 3s that can kind of blend in with the guards. But I mean, I think that's definitely a big need. I've said in the past, I mean, if Bub's back and they bring in Cummings, I think they could get away with 4 guards. But this past year, they only had 3. And I think they really got lucky or fortunate that those injuries weren't serious. So I think they definitely need to have 4 guards next year, whether Bub is one of them or not. And I mean, I would say a center of some kind. I mean, I don't know if you're going to get like the high impact center, like you said. I think the guy from Rutgers went in the portal, and someone brought him up on the message boards. It's like, I don't know. I mean, everyone's already saying he's going to St. John's. It's one of those like he entered the portal with a place in mind, and that's how it
Right.
is. That's how it is
Mhm.
for big guys. If you're
Yeah.
6'10" and skilled, like you already know where you're going, and if you don't, then people are going to be throwing money at you to go there. So
Yeah.
I like you said, I if Pitt has to commit to 3 really good guards, I don't know if they have the money to commit to a really good center. I mean, that's not to say they can't get a impactful center, someone that can, they can win games with, but probably not that big time guy from, Rutgers or whoever.
Yeah. Anywhere. And it's interesting on the stretch fours because that's like the one position they know they need someone, right? Where like nobody else is left. Like the only spot that is truly open right now, and I think the staff is approaching it this way of like, okay, this guy might go here, this guy might leave, this guy might do this guy might do that, but we know Blake is not coming back, so we need to get a guy to fill that. How much would you look at Zach Austin to play that role? People have been discussing this on the message board, and there's sort of a split opinion on how much he could fit into that role. Would you look at him to fill that the 4 spot?
I mean, I think he's capable of playing, doing more than what he provided this year, and I think part of that was just kind of deferring to who the best guys on the team were. I mean, obviously his shot was, he struggled with it early on, but it got better throughout the year. So, I mean, I think he can provide more points. I mean, I don't think he can really do the whole Blake Hinson role, and even before Blake Hinson, it was Mo Gee. I mean, like this has been a couple years now where they've had that good 6'10", power forward that can shoot threes. So I don't know. There's a healthy debate going on right now if Guillermo Diaz-Graham is a power forward or center on the message boards. I call Guillermo a 4.5. I don't think he's quite a center. I don't
Nice.
think he's quite a power forward. He's kinda a little bit of both, but he's probably not the guy you want starting next year either.
It probably depends on the matchup too, right? Like Guillermo defending Blake.
That's tough, but
Blake's
Guillermo
Blake's not
defending
really
Bacon's tough.
right, exactly. I mean, I'm trying to like think like Guillermo. I guess I just don't know who he defends. You know what I mean? Like he like even like a Will Jeffress, because Will could probably drive on him. I feel like most guys could probably drive on him. Now he can offer some rim protection and maybe try and block shots, but if the guy drives around him, it kind of doesn't matter. Like Zach Austin versus Guillermo Diaz-Graham one-on-one. What happens in that one-on-one pickup game?
Probably Zach Austin winning. I mean, I think he would get past him more often than not, and he could jump as high as Guillermo can stand. So I
That's
mean, I don't
true.
like he would be
He does.
blocking
He
some
does.
shots.
Yeah, he's got the length, so he could probably make it a little bit tougher to shoot threes from outside. And I know Guillermo put the ball on the court a couple times, but I don't think that's really what you want to have happen. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I was kind of the mind too about that. Of like, well, depending what happens at the center position, will impact whether or not they can move Guillermo out to the 4. But the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, I just don't know if that would really be all
You,
that
ju- you
great.
just have to take the bad interior post defense with him.
Right. Right. But he can provide some length, a little bit of rim protection,
Mhm.
not a ton, but then you just take what you get at the other end where you might get 2 or 3 threes in a game, which could be huge. Well, I thought it would be huge, and then he did it in the Carolina game and they ended up losing. So maybe it's not as big as I thought. Byron Fleck wants to know what's your system for filling out brackets. He has 2 systems. Or he fills out 2 brackets. He says, 1, in any matchup, I pick the team that's closest to the East Coast. And then 2, in any matchup, I pick the team whose town or city I'd rather live in. I wonder how Byron does with this. I wonder if he's like kept track of this over the years, if like one ends up working out being better than the other. I don't have any system like that. I don't know if you have. Do you have any little tips or tricks on filling out the bracket?
Now, whatever the first one I fill out, that's the one I use for any
Yeah,
pool I'm in.
same,
So it's like
same.
I don't know. I'm boring this year. I have UConn winning it all.
Same. So we're guaranteed to be wrong about that. So yeah, I like filling out a paper copy because then when I do like all the different online ones, I can, just get my paper
Excel.
copy out and
Mm.
import it, the old fashioned way, just type it right in. So yeah, I have UConn as well, but we'll see how that goes. Ryan wants to know percentage chance on the current guys coming back. Interested to hear on the guards. What do you think, Jim? You haven't, I mean, I feel like it's still really early to know to feel all that confident one way or the other. But what would you put like percentages at right now? Let's say for the 3 guards.
I mean, I'm reasonably confident that Lowe and Leggett are coming back, and I'm very much up in the air with Carrington. I don't know if I have exact percentages. I mean, I don't know, like 85 for those two, and maybe 50-50 with Bob.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like start of the week. I don't think my confidence was all that high. I think as the week has gone on, my confidence has sort of grown with Lowe and Leggett. Carrington, I feel like it's just, I don't even think it should be on the board yet because you just don't know. Yeah. Because it's not a question of like, well, is Pitt going to be able to come up with the NIL money to keep him from going to, wherever, Maryland or, Virginia or someplace. It's not, or Georgetown. It's not a question of that. It's a question of, does he choose to go to the NBA? And that's like a totally different animal to be battling against, like it's one thing to compete against other schools with NIL money, but if you're talking about draft and lottery picks and things like that, number one, the money's much bigger, and number two, it's a totally different sort of aspiration. It's a totally different sort of decision to make, and I don't know what he's going to do with that decision. I would assume he's going to enter the draft process, right? Go to the draft the scouting combine, and then make his decision after that, kind of like Blake Hinson did last year. Like Justin Champagnie did. Somebody else do it in between those two. Somebody do it 2 years ago.
They were pretty bad 2 years ago, so I don't know.
They were. But I mean, they were bad the year Champagnie was here too.
Yeah, I don't know, but
yeah. But Blake obviously did it last year. Champagnie did it 2 years before that, and Champagnie stayed in, Hinson left, or Hinson came back. I would expect Carrington to go through that process, and why wouldn't you? You have somewhere to come back to. It's not like you're going to be left without a home, and you might as well get the feedback. It seems like the feeling or the consensus is that this year is a weaker draft, that next year might be stronger. So if you have a guy who's maybe a little more borderline, like Carrington is right now, as opposed to what he might be in a year, this still might be the time to go. You might be a little more likely to end up as a draft. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't follow the NBA draft closely enough to say if that's accurate, but I kind of, if that's the case, I maybe that convinces him to go. I thought one thing, and you were in DC, you talked to him after the game. I transcribed some quotes of his from the video you put up, and I thought it was interesting when he talked about the things he needs to improve. When he was like, I can hit a three, I can hit a pull-up jumper, but I need to get better at finishing. I need to get better at getting to the basket and finishing. I thought that was pretty interesting for him to point that out, that he's got areas of his game he needs to improve and point him out sort of specifically. I thought that spoke to his self-awareness and maybe could speak to the kind of mentality that would lead to him coming back to try to improve. Maybe I'm just reaching there. Am I just grasping at straws on that one?
No, I mean, it does seem like, you can get feedback throughout the year. And I think his dad is pretty well connected. And I think they're going to make this decision. It's going to be a smart decision. I don't think it's going to be rushed. I mean, they're going to really look into things. So it's hard to say with him. And I don't know the specifics of this year's class versus next year's class draft wise. But I mean, I think this year, best case scenario, he sneaks into the first round, and I there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually great. That's what you want. There is a chance next year he can sneak into the lottery,
right.
and I think that he just has to weigh, would I rather do that or just go right now? And it's hard to say. I mean, it's not an easy decision, and a lot of guys, wrestle with this year after year. So I think the one thing working in his favor is he's young. So he's young for this class, and he's just going to be like a kind of like almost a freshman next year, like as a sophomore.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to be young enough that it's still going to be one of those things in his favor. So he has options, and options are good, for him.
Yeah. I do get the impression I've sort of heard like the goal is, I mean, obviously the goal is lottery pick, but to the point, or to the extent where they, maybe he and his family would avoid it if they even think there's a possibility of sliding into the, bottom half of the first round, that they want to avoid that outcome. Partially probably because if you're getting feedback that you're like bottom half of the first round, then there's a real possibility of sliding into the second round. I think they want to avoid developmental leagues and G leagues and things like that. I think they want to be a lottery pick, and that'll depend on the feedback. Like Josh Newark asked, if you're Jeff Capel, do you advise Bub to stay or go into the draft? I think you advise him on what's the best decision for him. I mean, I think you gather the feedback. I think you set aside your own desires, which your own desires and goals obviously would be to have him back. But, I think Jeff Capel, I sort of trust that he would gather as much information as he could, present it to Bub Carrington, and advise him based on that information. And if the best decision for Bub is to go, he would advise him to do so. I don't know. Jeff Capel doesn't really strike me as the type who would try and push a guy to stay if he feels like it's probably in his best interest to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could be misremembering, but I think Justin Champagny even said like Capel was one of the guys that said, you should go through the draft process. I've talked to some people. You're a good player. Like, see what's going to go. See what happens. Obviously, he didn't get drafted, but he's playing in the NBA right now. So, but I don't think he's going to hold any of his. I mean, he comes from Duke, where guys like leave after 1 year annually. Like this isn't. It's new to Pitt. It's not new to him. Like he has guys like Bub every year. So like this isn't like some wild concept. So I mean, I think he's going to do right by his player and give him every feedback, every opportunity to like, here is what it is. Either run with it or we have a spot for you. I mean, that's just what it is.
Yeah, and it's not a bad thing for a school to have a one and done guy. I mean, you want that guy to succeed, but it's not a bad thing to have a one and done guy. So I mean, it's in Capel's best interest as well. Not just, I mean, it's in Capel's best interest to have a one and done guy come out of Pitt. It's in Capel's best interest to have a reputation among players as someone who's going to help you, and look out for your best interests. I think he'll do whatever makes the most sense for Bub, and he'll advise him as such. Whether Bub listens or follows his own lead, I mean, that's, we'll see. Joey D says, do you think Malik Thomas will commit to Pitt? I think it's a decent chance, but I don't know. Like, gun to my head right now, Jim, no. But just because there's a gun to my head and it's a 5-star guy and you're going up against like Kentucky for him, you know what I mean? Like I can't, be intellectually honest and sit here and say, yeah, I think Pitt's going to win that. Now, I do think Pitt is right in the middle of it. He just had his official visit a couple of weeks ago. I think they're battling away with it. I think it really might be Pitt and Kentucky for this thing. I think there's a good chance that they're at the top of the top of the board for Malik Thomas. And with a possibility, right, that there's a possibility he could reclassify, right? I mean, there's some talk about that. I think. Am I making that up?
No, I think he could. I mean, I don't think it's been decided. And I was reading stuff because he's actually going for a state championship tomorrow. He and Brandon Cummings.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be something to watch. I think it's on like the Pennsylvania cable channel, if anyone still has that. So
PCN.
But yeah, Lincoln Park. So it'll be, if you want to watch a future Panther and maybe a second future Panther, tomorrow night is the night to do it. I don't know. I mean, it's so unique now with NIL, and it's just we just have to call it what it is. I mean, there are schools in his top 10 or top 12, whatever he cut it down to, that can just simply outbid Pitt, and that might happen. But I think Pitt has done everything it can to put itself in a good position. He has a great relationship with Capel. His best friend is committed to Pitt. I mean, he goes to every game, like under normal pre-NIL circumstances, like. This would be like a much bigger deal, something we'd be following more. But now it's just kind of like, we'll see who gets like the last offer in. Like it's almost like not as fun covering these recruitments anymore, because it's just like, well, something can happen right before signing day. Like there's never like a finality to it anymore. So I don't know, but I think Pitt's done a really good job. I still think there's a chance, probably a good chance. But I mean, Kentucky, Indiana, Kansas, whoever he wants to go to, he has all those opportunities.
Yeah, you're battling some heavy hitters there. I mean, they were heavy hitters before it was legal to be a really heavy hitter, and now it's legal, and you got to be able to swing for it. Tommy Graham says Papa Conti should play the 5. I think that's going to happen next year. I think he'll be in the rotation there. I just don't think he's going to give you what you're looking for. You know what I mean? I think what people want out of the center position is somebody who can score, and not and score like with their back to the basket, not somebody who's drifting out to the 3-point line and draining threes. I think they want a legit post-up option. I'm not sure Papa Conte has that offensive game in his arsenal right now. And he may never really develop it. I think he's a defender. I think he's a rebounder. I think he's a banger, but I don't know if he's necessarily a scorer.
I would agree with that, but I mean, I think he'll play some of the 5 next year. And I mean, like for instance, say if like Federico transfers and like they have to roll with Guillermo and Papa, like I don't think there's going to be much of a drop off because like Federico, he is what he is. I mean, you can win games with that too. I mean, they won 20 games the past 2 years with it. I mean, you just have to rely a lot of scoring on your perimeter, but they might be perimeter based next year, so that might work out. So I don't know. I mean, I think he's going to play. I think he's a talented guy. He's a top 100 guy. So as long as he comes back from injury, pretty good and in good shape. I mean, he'll compete. He'll get minutes.
Yeah, I think he's going to be in the mix there. I just don't. I think people are going to have high expectations. Be like, oh, Papa, he's going to be, but I just don't think that's his game. Dawson Marshall wants to know, how well do you think Pittsburgh will do next season? He says in basketball. I mean, it depends on those guards, right? I think everything depends on the guards. That's the only thing that, like, I mean, there are other factors that are going to impact it. There are other transfers they're going to go out and bring in, but it really depends on what Bub Carrington, Jalen Lowe, and Ishmael Leggett do. You disagree? I mean, I think it all comes down to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, on the high end of things, if all 3 of them come back and they get a decent Blake replacement, like that's a top 25 team in my opinion. I really believe that. But then there's a lot of variables. If one guy leaves, the next guy leaves, they don't get that great Blake replacement. Like, there's a lot of factors at play. But on the very high end of things, if everything this offseason goes well for the program, it could be very good next year.
Yeah. You kind of touched on this, but Luke Startari came in a little bit late. Do you know any news about Pitt basketball in the transfer portal so far, maybe trying to replace Blake's spot? You mentioned 2 guys. Have you gotten a chance to look into those 2 guys at all?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm Brandon Johnson from East Carolina. He averaged 14 points this year. He's a Raleigh native, and it seems like the Capels know everyone in the state of North Carolina, so there might be some sort of connection there. Then the other one is he's first team. I don't know what league they're in. For UNC Greensboro. I'm trying to think, Atlantic Sun maybe. I don't know. Maybe. But Mikhail Brown Jones, he averaged 18. He started his career at VCU, but now he's at UNC Greensboro. They're both 6'8", 220, 210-pound forwards. Johnson's probably the better shooter of the 2, but, Brown Jones has made some. So, I mean, those are 2 names, and there's going to be a million names. I think since Monday, there's been however many, 300, 400 guys enter the portal. It's only going to grow. So there's going to be candidates.
Yeah. UNC Greensboro is in the SoCon, in case, just to SoCon, Southern Conference. But yeah, and I think they sort of stand as potential replacements there. So that'll be, it's funny because I just, and I mean, we keep talking about this. I just it's like the guards. Like I have blinders on, and all it is just Jalen Lowe and Bub Carrington and Ishmael Leggett. And like, there's other stuff. There's other guys. They're contacting guys. They're in touch with other guys. I mean, like you said, Pitt has reached out to. I forget if I've probably told this story once before, but I always remember because anytime I see like Pitt has reached out to player X, and there was like a transfer. It was a football player. It might have even been a high school guy, like a late cycle target. And he was like, yeah, Pitt reached out to me. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, what'd you hear? What'd they say? And he sent me a screenshot of a direct message from a Pitt assistant football coach. And all it said, it was the first message in the chain. And it said Pitt with an exclamation point. And I was like, that's what the coach sent you? He's like, yeah. I'm like, anything since then? He's like, no. And I'm like, but Pitt has reached out to this guy. And literally he just sent a direct message that said Pitt with an exclamation point. And I'm like, what is that it? Like that's what counts as contact these days. So I assume the basketball, whoever is running the Pitt basketball Twitter accounts and coaches' Twitter accounts are being a little bit more eloquent than that. But, I don't know. Maybe they're just all really into the brevity thing, like just get to the point. I mean, like, why I'm DMing you. I know why you would have interest in replying to me. So yeah, Dawson Marshall, just give us a visual aid. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. That's exactly what it looked like. That was the whole. That kid did not come to Pitt, by the way. In case you were curious, if you wanted a conclusion to the story, he did not come to Pitt. He didn't even visit or anything like that. Weird times, but that's what I always think of when I think of contact. So I'm sure they're in touch with a lot of guys, and then like we said, like you said, they're a couple of sort of prominent targets have emerged at the fore, and I think that the staff is kind of like I said. I mean, I think that's where they're really sort of focusing first in terms of contacting transfers, is looking for someone to fill Blake's spot, and then as they have other spots open up, they'll work to fill them. Meanwhile, a lot of other work is being done with Lowe and Leggett and Carrington. I don't really think there's any usefulness to this, but I mean, would you rank those three? Like, do you have a ranking on those three of like importance? Is it Bub, Jalen-ish? Is that how it goes?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, you could make a case because like Bub's probably not going to stay 4 years, and Jalen could, and you could make the case that he's better for the long-term option, but for next season. But everything just works from year to year now. There's no point of ever thinking about 2 years from now. It's next year. So yeah, it's Bub, Jalen-ish.
I would like Bub and Jalen to play together. Someone else made this point to me. I would like Bub and Jalen to play together one more year, just because I think they could each pick up little things from each other's game. Like, I think Bub could pick up a little bit from Jalen on just pure driving. Like, when that crack presents itself, when that little bit of daylight shows itself, you drive, you attack the basket, and you finish, and kind of be crafty in how you finish, the way Jalen does. At the same time, I think Jalen could pick up a little bit from Bub on how to use and hit the mid-range jumper. And he makes them, but I feel like Bub was a little bit better at it. I think I just want to watch those two guys play together again. You know what I mean? I think they were a lot of fun to watch when they played together. They're a lot of fun to have on the court together, and they complement each other well. And I mean, obviously, Pitt is a better team when they have both of those guys. Dawson Marshall says, do you think Jalen Lowe will become one of the top guards in the ACC? I mean, I think there was like solid 11 to 15 games where he was one of the top guards in the ACC. He played at that level. He didn't play at that level all season, but by the end of the year, I think he absolutely was one of the top guards in the ACC. What do you think makes Bub the like sort of more imminent NBA prospect? Is it the size? Is that what really sets him apart from Jalen?
I think so. I think it's like, the combination of just being a 6'5", you could play point guard. He's probably big enough he could play shooting guard too. So I mean, I think he's pretty good with creativity. Maybe not like in the sense of a true point guard, but when he comes off those screens, he can find those guys in the corner. He's good at those kind of passes and that kind of playmaking. So, and like, the age thing, like I think doing the triple double first game of his career, it's like everyone's like, all right, we got to pay attention to this guy. And I think the more they watch, the more they like. But I mean, I think Jalen Lowe, they list him at 6'3". I don't think he's that tall. I'm almost positive he's not, but he's a good college player. He's going to be a really good college player. I think he's a 4-year guy, and if all 4 of those years,
shoot, if Pitt gets him for 4 years, I mean,
like he's putting up serious damage.
Yeah, it would be. I would go so far as to say, and I would say the same thing about like Bub if he were to happen to stay 4 years. But if they have Jalen Lowe for 4 years and they don't make a Sweet 16 in somewhere in those 4 years, I think it will be a major disappointment and a bit of a shock, because I think he's that good. And I think he's good enough that other guys will want to play with him, because he's really good at passing. He's really good at finding those guys and making those plays. The other thing with Bub too, I think, is defense. I mean, he became a really good defender by the end of the season. Did you say defense? Am I repeating something
I didn't. No, but that's a good call, and he was better at it. Like, because he had a little stretch where he had like foul trouble every game, and he kind of got over that the last like 6 or 7 games. He was actually awesome the last 6 or 7 games.
Yeah, I mean, the Wake Forest game, like Hunter Salas, and it was him and Ishmael Leggett, but like, I mean, they shut him down. And it wasn't, I mean, he shot 5 of 9, but like, I feel like 9 field goal attempts was like the bottom 3 of Hunter Salas's games this season. Like he only had like 3 or 4 games where he attempted fewer than 10 shots. They just like, he made shots. 5 of 9 is a great shooting percentage, but like he just didn't get many opportunities to shoot. Like they were just like limiting what he could do, and he committed 5 turnovers in the process. I mean, they were great, and for a decent chunk or some amount of that Carolina game, I thought they did a pretty good job. RJ Davis got loose in the second half, but because I think at halftime, Davis and Blake Hinson had 10 points or something like that, like or 11. Like it was very low scoring from the ACC's 2 leading scorers by the end by halftime. But obviously Davis found his groove a little bit. Anthony Tennyson says, I think all 3 guards will come back because of the culture that's been set, but also the money will help too. But I don't think they have to break the bank. So I think, and this applies to both teams, football and basketball at Pitt. For your best players, you're probably going to have to get a hometown discount of sorts. And I think football got it last year with some of the biggest names that they brought back. They were able to get hometown discount. Like I think Gavin Bartholomew, I think Kenny Johnson, probably Solomon DeShields, maybe Rodney Hammond, maybe even some of the tackles. I don't know. Offensive tackles could have gotten more money elsewhere than they got through NIL by staying at Pitt. And I think Blake Hinson coming back this year would have gotten more elsewhere than he got at Pitt. And that's just what you're going to have to do. There's always going to be somebody out there, I think, who can outspend Pitt for the best players. They're going to have to get some hometown discounts. And if they get any of these guards they get back, those guards are going to, they're going to be taking less than they could have gotten at other schools. Now, Jalen Lowe and his family go back a long way with Jeff Capel. They've got family connections there. Same with Bub Carrington. It seems like Ishmael Leggett and Capel have formed a pretty strong bond through this season. So you'd like to think those things will help sort of smooth the landing on that one. Make it more palatable for the players to take a little bit less. But I mean, I think if you're Pitt, you're going to have to count on that. You know what I mean? You're going to have to rely on that because you're never going to have the deepest pockets. That's just a reality of who Pitt is. And there's a lot of schools that are never going to have the deepest pockets. But if you want to keep your best guys, you're going to need them to take a little bit of a discount. And maybe it's a testament to Pitt, both on the football and basketball side, that they've got cultures in place where guys are willing to do that. And not everybody's willing to do it. Sam Okunlola wasn't willing to do it. DeAndre Jules wasn't willing to do it. But a lot of guys were on the football side, and they're going to need a lot of guys to be willing to do it on the basketball side too.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I to Anthony's point, I do think there's a good set of culture there. I mean, winning helps, but we're not too far removed from a Pitt basketball program where everyone hated each other and we were around it, and you could feel it in the locker room. You could feel it in the press conference. Like, these guys don't like each other. Like, after that game, I was in the locker room the other night. Like, those guys like each other. Like, they're friends. And like, I do think that helps like Pitt's cause. Like, and there might be a sense of unfulfillment. Like, we're a good team. We should have been in the tournament. Let's see if we can do it next year. And I think there might be a little bit of that. So I don't know, but winning helps. But yeah, these guys like each other. The guys like 3 or 4 years ago did not like each other.
Yeah, and I think it helps when you are losing 4 out of 5 games. You know what I mean? You lose 2, you win 1, you lose 2. And the last 2 losses in there are really bad. One, you just got your brains beat in, and the other one was just a terrible loss. You could fall apart. And to that team's credit, they didn't fall apart. They went down to beat Duke. So it's a nice way to bounce out of it. Luke Sartari says, how much do you think Brandon Cummings will play next year with the possibility of all of Pitt's guards returning? I think even if all 3 guards come back, I think he'll get time. You know what I mean? I think there's room to rotate 4 guards. You don't have to have 3 guys playing 37 minutes every night. Maybe if he's good enough, there's a little bit of flexibility to move Zach Austin to the 4 that you can rotate those guards through a little bit more. You still don't want to take Bub Carrington and Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett off the court all that much, but Cummings might be good enough that he can get into a rotation with those guys and make an impact.
Yeah, I think he's a good player, and I think he's a little bit underrated by some of the recruiting services. He's good. I mean, I've watched some of those Lincoln Park games. Like, he's hitting fadeaway threes. I mean, he looks like another Bub. So, I mean, I think he could come in and contribute right away. And it kind of depends. Like, if they bring back all 3 guards, do all 3 of them start, or does Ish do the 6-man thing again? Like, there's a lot of variables at play. But I mean, Brandon Cummings should have a role next year in either way.
He could impact that right there. I like personally, I would start Ishmael Leggett, even if Brandon Cummings is not ready to play. But definitely, if Cummings is ready to play, I would start Leggett and either start Austin at the 4 or bring Zach Austin off the bench. I don't know why I said Austin first and then Zach Austin, as if I was talking about different guys. But I would probably bring Zach Austin off the bench. If you get a transfer 4, I would start him with the three guards, and then you bring Cummings in and you rotate the guards sort of that way. If he's ready to contribute, I think it makes it easier to start. But even if he's not, I would still probably start those 3 guys. I think they showed this year. Like, what do you gain by not starting Leggett? If he's going to play 35 minutes anyway or 30 minutes, you might as well just start him. Unless you like that spark, right? That spark off the bench, that Nike Sabandi spark, that young Ashton Gibbs spark of coming up the bench. Maybe they like that, and he still ends up playing starter minutes anyway. So maybe there's value to that when he comes in, 5 minutes into the game. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, there could be something to it. I mean, there are some guys that just kind of like watching the first couple possessions, pick their spots, and go on the floor and just hit the ground running. So maybe Leggett's one of those guys. And again, like we didn't get that like year-end talk with these guys. Like I would have liked to like learn more about that from Leggett. And
well, we did. We talked to him prior to the ACC tournament, and he never said that. Like what you just said, like I like coming off the bench better. He definitely never said that. He even let on that it was a little bit tough when he had to go to the bench, but that's his role, and so he absorbed it or adopted it, and he embraced it. So no, he's not that guy. I think he would definitely disagree. I think given the option, he would move back into the starting lineup. It was the same thing with Nike Sabandi. Jeff Capel said it that like, no, he didn't like going to the bench. He came into that season, last year expecting to be a starter, but he wasn't healthy enough. You know what I mean? He wasn't fully recovered yet, so he couldn't. I think given the choice, Leggett would prefer to start, but maybe, you get 4 minutes into the game, 5 minutes in the game, and then all of a sudden this guy comes off the bench and it's like, oh crap, they got this guy too. Like we have to deal with this now. We have this guy who's going to bully his way to the basket along the baseline a bunch of times. That's crap. We have to do that.
The only thing I felt bad about him like not starting was the tournament games like in his hometown. Like it would have been cool for him to get announced like with this, he probably dreamed of like playing in that arena. Like he didn't get that chance, and like I kind of like watched him as like like he was excited, but like you have that moment in your head in your backyard at the Capital One Arena starting for the Wizards. Ishmael Leggett, like he didn't get that.
Yeah, it's too bad. He's kind of a stoic guy. Don't you think? I mean, like he's not Jamarius Burton, who is sort of like this like stoic basketball monk kind of. I wrote that once that he was like this like stoic basketball monk, and Dave Damashek, you follow him on Twitter?
Yeah,
I think and so he was like, oh, you missed an opportunity to call him Thelonious Dunk. And I'm like, oh damn, that was good.
That was good.
That was really good. I was like, crap, you always get the best ones come out later. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, he's not quite as stoic as Jamarius was, but I feel like he's pretty like, I mean, he gets pumped up, but it's not, I don't know. He's not too rowdy. Let's see. Was there another question I wanted to get to here? We'll get a football one. Football Hawk wants to know, what's the ceiling for Pitt football next season? Jim, I'll let you take that.
8-4-ish. Does that sound about right? Like
ceiling. That's the ceiling. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I need to see more. So
yeah, I was gonna say 9 as the ceiling, and that's with the ball bouncing certain ways. You know what I mean? Like that's with
that's
the ball bouncing certain ways. Yeah, exactly. Or maybe a bowl win. I mean, and it might be lower. I usually overestimate what Pitt teams are going to accomplish. I'm wondering if I'm starting to veer toward underestimating, but we could probably do. We probably could, and we probably will do much longer shows talking about that, because I thought we'd talk about some football tonight, but here we are. We just spent an hour talking about basketball. But such is the case when the season just ended, and I think, next couple of weeks there'll probably be basketball news for us to talk about, and if there isn't, there's always football stuff to discuss, and recruiting will be coming up. Things will definitely be heating up. But anyway, thanks everybody who tuned in tonight. We appreciate it. It's been a fun hour, as it always is. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, so you don't miss any of the Pitt video content. These live streams, post-game shows when there are actually games, and the morning Pitt videos, Monday through Friday. plus all our video coverage from spring camp. And then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks again for tuning in tonight or watching the video whenever you did. Jim, thanks for hanging out as always. And everybody have a great night, and we'll talk to you tomorrow with the Morning Pit right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.